Hello everyone. It's been a while since the last MOJODraws. I can't believe I haven't drawn in over 6 months. Just, what have I been doing with my time? Eh. Anyway, today's talking point is Snootgame. Yeah, Snootgame. I know none of you know what that is, but it's alright. We've all made mistakes. But you'll learn. I'm afraid you don't have a choice. Unless you click away from the video. Didn't think about that. Anyways, Snootgame is an indie visual novel game that is a parody of another indie visual novel game called Goodbye Volcano High, which some of you may remember being revealed back in June of 2020 at that Sony event hyping up the PS5. It was the game with the dinosaur people in it. The dinosaur high schoolers, this one. The trailer itself was vague, melodramatic, teenage angst bullshit with no actual info on what the gameplay was like, so most people either memed on it quickly or just forgot about it. Especially compared to something like Resident Evil Village or Ratchet and Clank. But on the internet, things are never truly forgotten. People looked into what info they could find on the game, and what they found was just a pile of things to mock. The teenage angst bullshit, the dawn of an era crap, just the high and mighty, melodramatic, teenage, just that level of writing, the high school setting. All of that quickly led to a bunch of memes being formed, the most obvious and famous of which was a certain school something, let's say the main character there was walking down the highway with a certain Foster the People song playing. And of course, horny posting, because nothing is really sacred when anthropomorphic characters are involved. So, this anti-fan base had formed around the game with discussion on 4chan mocking it over the following weeks, making memes, drawing the possibly lewd fan art, making theories about how bad the game would be, dissecting the characters and making backstories for them, writing fan fiction, forming connections with these characters that they were recreating, and you can see where I'm going with this anti-fan base. Through their own high-speed shitpost fuel evolution, formed a team of devs, artists, and writers with their goal in mind. So over the next year, this group, calling themselves Caveman On, made their own visual novel game based on this one Goodbye Volcano High trailer and what other few bits of info they could find, filling in the vast blanks with their own ideas, writings, and that classic 4chan humor. Thus, Snootgame was born. A critique, a parody of Goodbye Volcano High, a game that of this video is still unreleased. Basically, the team took the premise, setting, and the characters and developed their own universe with them. So I want to mention 3 things before I get into my galaxy brain analysis of all this. One is that I'm not going to get into any real criticism of Goodbye Volcano High because I honestly just don't really care about it. I remember it being revealed, thinking, that's, unique, weird game. But I just don't care about it that much. 2 is that Co-op, this studio behind Goodbye Volcano High, they can make whatever game they want, tackling whatever issues they want, writing their characters however they want. They can do whatever they want. From what I understand, they don't much like Snootgame. Completely understandable. Having an entire parody game come out that sort of runs ideologically opposed to your own game before your game is even released, I can imagine that's pretty frustrating. Having all your characters rewritten, settings retooled, ideas changed, it's not a good situation, given, how good I think Snootgame is. So I just want to make it clear that I'm just going to be looking at Snootgame in a vacuum. I understand where it came from. I'm not entirely happy with it, but Goodbye Volcano High is its own thing, and Snootgame just uses its premise and character designs to tell a story of its own. And 3, speaking of that story, Snootgame is 100% a visual novel. There's only the story to experience, so I highly recommend you just play it for yourself. Turn the video off and go play it. Doing all the content should take no more than 8 to 10 hours. It's really an earnest story about character growth and empathy, and it's not one big joke at the expense of non-binaries. It's not just crammed full of edgy humor. There's some humor in there, and if you don't like that, fair warning. I'll include a link in the description to the game if you want to play it, as well to Goodbye Volcano High's site, because those devs also deserve a chance. So last chance, spoilers ahead. Snootgame's main character is anonymous. It's a joke. First name Anon, middle initial Y, last name Muss. He's an 18-year-old caveman/human that has transferred to Volcano High from his old school, moving towns to Volcadero Bluffs in the process. He lives alone, no family. in a crappy apartment. It's halfway through his senior year of high school, and his reasons for suddenly transferring schools and towns, he leaves vague. He doesn't want to talk about them, and later you just realize that he was bullied out of his old school. Anon is the stereotypical 4chan loser. He's a weeb whose only hobbies are playing video games, watching movies, TV shows, and just shitposting. He doesn't give a shit about anyone besides himself, not in an overtly mean way. He just can't give a damn. He just wants to be alone. No problem, no trouble, but no friends or no anything. He doesn't want the burden of other people's problems. He doesn't want to deal with other people. In Anon's opinion, he'd probably say that any interactions with others only really results in some kind of inconvenience to himself. So you could just say he's a selfish prick because he's too weak to deal with anything other than his own suffering, and he's too young and inexperienced to consider if he wants anything more out of life. I think Snootgame's main goal is to teach you, the player via an example, how stupid this mindset is. Through a series of maybe contrived happenings and encounters, because a story needs to happen. Anon the loner is thrown into a friend group, a family group, dealing with the ongoing mental breakdown of the game's central figure, Fang. That's the character I'm drawing now. Fang is the other main character of Snootgame. If Anon's a pathetic loser who wants to fade to nothing, Fang's the complete opposite. Fang is the loud, obnoxious loser who wants to be the center of attention. Inside her is that ever-gnawing need for validation, praise, or just the littlest bit of attention. But she has no clue how to obtain it in any reasonable, healthy way, so she just does what any dumb teenager does and just adopts various ideologies or personas to give herself the appearance of a personality of any depth at all. Loud makeup, punk rocker aesthetic, claims of being non-binary, changing her name, whatever actions or labels she can adopt to just get any sort of attention, positive or negative, with the ongoing trend being mostly negative. Alright, Fang, Anon, boy, girl. Obviously this is a romance story. Human caveman, female dinosaur. We've all been there before. Maybe. I would think in Snootgame, like in most other VNs I imagine, your choices are more aimed towards the guy or girl you decided to get with. Here it's different, or at least I think it is. There's only one romance option, and it's not an option. You don't have a choice not to romance Fang. Fang and Anon are simply meant to date, to form some bond. And it's interesting to bake the relationship directly into the game's narrative and then just let the various endings expand on what happens to that relationship and these characters based on your choices. There's a few sections in the game where certain events happen that bring the two closer together. Part of this is revealed to be sort of set up by another character who is intentionally trying to get them together. But realistically, Fang and Anon are just sort of compatible. They share many simple interests like TV shows, music, and things like that. But more importantly, they're two of similar mindsets. Other people are stupid to them. Anon thinks other people can only cause problems for him, so it's reasonable to think that he also sort of assumes that, well, they must be idiots. Why are they causing all these problems for me? Fang, in her mental gymnastics that she's assembled for herself, she just thinks this people is nothing but sheeps or idiots or assholes or bigots or, in her words, cock goblins, for not recognize her as special and unique. Really, this can mostly just be attributed to them being dumb, edgy teenagers, but in the end, they're just both outcasts. They bond simply over being alone, of having that similar worldview. Now, the longevity and quality of this inevitable relationship that's baked directly into the story, that's sort of what I find interesting. One of the things. Dealing with Fang is the core of Snootgame's plot and its sort of overarching goal, and how well you do that's graded on the various endings you can get. There's a total of 4 endings, 2 bad, 2 good, or in my opinion, there's an edgy ending, a depressing ending, a bittersweet ending, and a perfect ending. Each of these contains a radically different type of relationship for Fang and Anon, and a radically different Fang and Anon, with an obvious increasing level of happiness for both of them as you go through them all. These endings are determined by both Anon and Fang's character growth over the course of the game, which is linked to the various choices Anon makes over the games. What you're improving fundamentally is Anon's empathy and Fang's confidence. Early on in the game, a certain caveman principle gives Anon a bit of advice. You are not the only person in the world, and that is his goal. Anon needs to learn how to step outside of himself just to deal with others, to gain empathy for other people's feelings, and to just value others' happiness more so than his own. For example, a scenario arises where Fang and her brother Nasser and his girlfriend Naomi and Anon are trying to figure out a venue for Fang's band to play. It's obvious that Fang is about to have a psychotic break as she despises Naomi and Nasser to an extreme degree at that point in the story. And after a particular story reveal, Anon learns that Naomi has been the one trying to get Anon and Fang together, as she believes that a relationship will make Fang more normal. Nasser will then stop always worrying about his sister, trying to help her, and Naomi will be able to have a more perfect relationship with Nasser. Now Anon, realizing that he's been manipulated for months, wants nothing more than to ditch the group and go find Fang and just fuck off somewhere. Fang's having taken a break from the whole situation via a bathroom break. Anon has the choice of waiting for Fang to get back or ditching Nasser and Naomi. And in the context of the story reveal, leaving the group really seems like the more correct choice, but leaving would be Anon admitting that his anger at this situation is more important than helping Fang find a band venue. Regardless, he still end up doing that, but it's a moral mark to be judged later, to be added up. I'm going to tough it out because I care about Fang. Those are the choices Anon makes to improve himself. To care about others, which runs against his stereotypical 4chan shitposter mindset, his extreme egotistical selfishness. People like that often, they end up alone, and it sort of really kills them on the inside, because no matter how much time you devote to your own hobbies and your interests in yourself, you'll fundamentally be missing out on what you just need, which is to care about someone else more than yourself. It's fulfillment. And I think that's more of a guy thing, traditional male role model, whatever. You can criticize that, but I truly think Anon is the type of person who needs to do that. Fang requires a different kind of help. Later on, another character gives you another piece of advice concerning your obviously developing romance with Fang. The secret is support. Pretend I said that in an Italian accent. Fang needs to learn to respect herself and her interests, and just to simply have confidence in herself, that she is someone, that there is a definition for Fang. Support in this context is giving Fang her own choices to define herself. Directly following that last example, the group is still together, provided Anon chose to stay, but the Fang meltdown is still a threat. Anon knows this and wants them to split up on good terms, but Nasser won't allow Anon to be alone with Fang under the threat of complete obliteration from her father. The choice you're presented is to ask Nasser to split up, or to ask Fang to split up. The resulting decision plays out with or without Fang's involvement. You can ask Nasser, reasoning with him that it would just be better to get Naomi away from Fang, to which he protests, obviously. But Naomi, who is still playing Puppet Master, sees what you're doing and backs you up. Fang gets no say, but she still thanks you for getting rid of them. Asking Fang, however, lets her explain to Nasser why she wants to split the group up. Again, Naomi will back the decision up, but letting Fang reason for herself that Nasser would trust Anon and Fang to be alone together, to let her say, I want to go alone with Anon to search for this venue. Otherwise, I'm going to beat your girlfriend to death, is what lets her speak her mind and decide what she wants. That's how you grow Fang. That's how you grow your Fang, to give her decisions that are really hers to make to begin with, and to let her speak when she needs to. At the beginning of the game, Fang barely has any foundation she can support herself on, aside from her music. That's essentially the only thing that's really true to her at that moment. The rest, the punk rock, the non-binary, are just things she's adopted, only for the attention from others, but they don't work for her because they aren't true for her. And her music, well, most people can't sustain themselves off passion, and in Fang's case, it's just become more about the success and the recognition of being a musician that's famous, rather than the actual passion of playing or creating. She's got layers and layers of just bullshit strapped to her, to the point where she doesn't know who she is. She doesn't know what to get rid of and what to keep. And you can't just tell her what she is, because that's for her to figure out. Do I stop playing music for a while just to see how badly I miss it? Do I go back to being gendered just to see if that feels right? And there's possibly the pain and failure of going down either of those paths, but you have to figure out on yourself. There's no easy answer you can just choose. You just have to suffer the hardship, and support is how a lot of people get through that. So that's effectively the game, a dozen or so choices that can radically alter the lives of these poor saps. It's a bit shocking to boil it down to just that. But when you're in the middle of the game, you don't really realize how little choice you have, given that there's probably a dozen or so choices, maybe 2 dozen, that don't really matter. They're just cosmetic or they're just humorous, which is fine. After playing through the game at least once, you understand what the setup is. You get it. So you can easily just rush through the game again to see what a different choices mean. You're looking for those endings, and that's what you really want to see. There's very little variation in the beginning of the game, no matter what choices you pick. And that's because they need the writers need to bake in the romance between Anon and Fang, and it's in a way it's several hours of setup, and then those characters are tested, and you see what the results will be. And you get those, the endings. There's 4 of them, with each revolving around what kind of people Anon and Fang have become. If Anon and Fang have grown as characters, various relationship issues between them and side characters are resolved. They're just better people. They know what they want to do. And if they haven't grown, well, there are some problems, some major problems. I'm going to talk in gross, extreme detail about these endings, so I guess one last spoiler warning. If I've managed to convince you to go play the game, go play it. If not, let's begin. So, ending 1, that's the worst ending. Objectively, I don't think anyone can argue against that. It's the really edgy ending, and you can guess why. Fang goes full pumped up kicks in the school. I'm not a huge fan of this ending in the sense that I think it's the most extreme negative outcome to a bad situation, and it's not built up properly. And there's a certain event that sort of throws doubts on the entire validity of this ending, to me at least. So, some explanation. Anon and Fang are still dating in this ending, and all the endings they have some sort of relationship, and again, the quality varies. But here, it's the worst one. It's just a really shallow relationship. I mean, they still love and care for each other, but they're oftentimes just ignoring the other one. They're still sort of trash people. Anon's still really selfish. He doesn't understand what's happening to Fang. Oftentimes just playing video games and just sort of shrugging. Fang is still trapped in her complexes, but she ultimately decides that the only thing that can prove her value is to have her band perform at the school prom. It's sort of as a Hail Mary, one last chance. And that goes belly up in an extreme fashion, followed by the reveal to her that her relationship with Anon was just a plan of Naomi, who again she hates. And all these revelations and events just break her. And Anon's too stupid at the moment to actually help her. So pumped up kicks happens. Anon desperately tries to intervene. But Fang is just pushed over the edge, literally. It's a very condensed, very brutal ending. Fang decides that all the assholes at school are to blame for her problems. It's the same mentality she had at the beginning of the game, but much worse. To the point where she decides that they all have to pay. I feel like this ending is a leftover of that original meme, and something that the writers felt like they had to put into the game. And I guess it works as a meta punishment for the player for really fucking up that badly when dealing with Fang, for that being that irresponsible with your choices. And full disclosure, this was technically my first ending. I was trying to aim low, since I had an idea about how the game was structured, so I was trying to glide in just above this ending, make a couple good choices. But I still got this one, and I was just like, this wasn't built up properly. That was my feeling at the time. And not seeing it coming, that in a way that is really fitting for Anon's mentality, because he didn't see this coming, and during the ending scenario, he's thinking to himself, how could I let this happen? Why couldn't I see this happening in front of me? What could I have done differently? And I guess my most legitimate criticism is that a big part of this ending is it hinges on when the band is setting up for this prom performance. Fang's guitar string just snaps, and there's no way to replace it, so she has to go back to playing a bass, which is a big part of why everyone thinks they're terrible and mocks them, because the game explains that 2 basses in a band is like a really hard thing to do, and I just assumed that the game's correct on this, so it's already been established that they sound much better when Fang uses the guitar, so that brings up the question, would the prom concert have gone full carry if Fang had played the guitar? The guitar string snap is only in this ending, so we really don't have anything else to compare it to. The question is, when the band performance went to shit like that, would a more confident, developed Fang ended up going to such extremes in the end? I don't know. In a way, this pumped up Kicks ending is a valid scenario. I just really questioned the build up to it. But on the other hand, maybe that's the point. Maybe it's supposed to come out of nowhere, because for Anon, that's what really happens. So maybe I just have a personal distaste for this ending because of the brutality. I don't know. It's the weakest ending in my opinion, but I can see why other people will hold it in higher regards in terms of its validity. Now, ending 2 is much more realistic. Anon and Fang don't even attend prom here, with Fang seemingly not caring about the band, her friends, her brother, or anything really aside from her relationship with Anon. She declares Anon a pansexual since he's dating a non-binary, and congratulates him on his, quote, growth. Anon just mentally criticizes this as he doesn't care, though he does start actively using the correct pronouns for the rest of this section, which is interesting. Just both of them seem more irresponsible, to the point of just ignoring schoolwork, going to sketchy concerts, smoking a lot more, and ending up lying to get out of the house on prom night. And they end up going to the beach instead of prom, drinking and shooting off fireworks. Anon gets wasted almost immediately, and in his drunken ramblings mentions Naomi's plan, which sparks an argument with Fang that leads to Anon just rebuking all of Fang's non-binariness and calling her a schizo with daddy issues and just in general being a complete ass. Fang, of course, dumps him, and Anon just goes into a complete misery spiral, flunking out of school and making the poor decision to just join the Navy in the hopes of getting something of a future. Instead, he's just rewarded with 4 years of pure misery, and I believe he's discharged due to injury. I'm not quite sure on that point. The game's a little vague, but for whatever reasons, after his tour, he decides to go back to Volcadera Bluff and get his own apartment where he just starts living as a NEET with zero contact with anyone. Apartment full of trash, chain smoking, eyeing the rope. Not a good mental state. This is Doomer Anon, devoid of all hope or happiness. This is the end result of his entire mentality at the end of the game. He doesn't want to deal with people, so he doesn't. Because now he's just literally too weak to. He hasn't changed, he's just collected a bunch of misery. And to push the idea of just how hopeless this situation is, Anon has a chance encounter at a pizza restaurant, which for some reason has live music. He sees Fang playing. And Fang is fared no better than him. Shaved head, covered with tattoos, dead eyes. She just kept going down that same path she was going down, and now she has nothing inside her either. In this moment, Anon plays out that expected fantasy in his head, where we're going to meet again, we're going to rekindle, we're going to fix ourselves. But then he just ends up dropping it almost immediately, pulling the rug out from under himself before he can even start, before he has a chance to fail. Anon can't help Fang. He can't fix her. He's no better than he was in high school. He's many times worse as now. And, so is she, so why bother? Just apathy. Altogether, I think this is a much better bad ending as opposed to one. There's no need for extremes. It's just a very poignant message aimed at the mentality that Snootgame criticizes. You can't just not do anything. You need to care about something. And ending 3. Oh boy. I'm going to have to talk about this one a lot, as it is the most complex and, for me personally, the most interesting to pick apart. Technically, this is a good ending, but it's bittersweet to the point of just really stabbing you with those feels, leaving you with a nasty uncertainty about what's going to happen after the credits roll. Here, Fang essentially becomes codependent on Anon for everything. If ending 2 was her doubling down on her complexes, her Fang persona, ending 3 is Fang completely rejecting that aspect of her life and rebecoming Lucy, which was her name before she changed it. But in rejecting Fang, she also rejects all of her friends and even her music. Ending 3 is incredibly long, but there's a general enough summation you can make for it. Fang has a massive falling out for friends and passion itself because she just isn't strong enough to deal with her own problems in a healthy way. And she copes by turning completely towards her relationship with Anon as her only joy in life. She tries to become whatever he wants. For the friend issue, the key character here is Trish, who I haven't mentioned up till now, but she does play a very integral part in this story, and I think in ending 3 here I can bring her up. Trish is the girl who originally helps Lucy become Fang, implying she's the one who enabled Fang's shoddy attempts to fix herself by adopting all those labels. Trish is the one who told Fang who to be. And she meant well, it's with good intentions, but both of them are just too young and the help just ended up being bad. Trish interprets Anon's actions throughout the game, no matter how well they are done, as just hostile. He just wants to change Fang. He just wants her for her body. He's just messing with the band's dynamics. He's just ruining everything. He's changing everything. From the beginning, she's aggressive towards Anon, and which culminates in her publicly humiliating Anon in front of the entire school. And how Anon responds to this is one of those decisions that grows him as a person, but regardless, Fang always takes your side after the fact, aside from ending 1, and just cuts Trish out of her life. In ending 4, there's a reconciliation after a time period, but in ending 3, it's just a complete cutoff. That falling out serves as the catalyst for the abandonment of the Fang persona. Lucy's just deeply hurt by her friends fighting because of her, and she's not strong enough to deal with it in a healthy way, so Fang just completely avoids Trish, which in turn causes Trish so much pain that she breaks down herself. And the other band member, Reed, who is also Fang's close friend, chooses to comfort Trish during this time, because Fang has Anon, and Trish is all alone. And that association there causes Fang to cut him out of her life. Then Fang's other friends, Stella and Rosa, I know I'm bringing up all these characters, but it doesn't matter in the end. Stella and Rosa, they also choose to help Trish at a certain point, and Fang blacklists them, and it's not out of malice. Again, Fang, who's now Lucy, she can't deal. She just suffers extreme stress when any aspect of her old life is brought up. And then this reaches its tipping point at prom, where I think Lucy finally just snaps and treats anything that is Fang as just bad. This is the point of no return. Trish, extremely depressed that Lucy has blacklisted her, has set up a surprise performance at prom, sort of a last-ditch effort, and on the spot just asks Lucy to play, trying to reconcile with Lucy. And Trish is frantic. She won't take no for an answer, which Lucy is practically screaming at her. This is where Rosa and Stella get caught in the crossfire, having helped Trish set all this up, and it begins very earnestly, with the band group making sense. It would just be better if Trish and Lucy just made the effort to patch things up. But Lucy can't do it. That mental block is too strong at this point, and it's just causing her too much pain. So Anon gets Rosa and Stella to back off. They can see what's happening, but Trish is just not stopping. She demands Lucy play until Anon flat out imposes his will on the situation. It's a hard no. Trish backs off, relents. Of note here is that Anon, in his internal monologue and his actions during this scene, is very mean. He refers to Rosa and Stella, he's been on pretty good terms with up to this point. He referred to them as being incompetent or a loser squad, which is a really out of character moment for him. I think it's really telling of his mental state. It's gloves off for anyone who causes Lucy any amount of pain. In his mind, he is taking care of Lucy. He is fixing her. But now he is Trish. Continues on, he completely shuts down Trish after she comes back to him, trying to make some form of amends, trying to say she's sorry, and just saying that Lucy will never have to see her again. She's just going to disappear. Obviously, Trish is in an extreme amount of emotional pain right here, and Anon doesn't even give a damn. He doesn't flinch, and he just ends the conversation with saying, "Oh well." Well, that ends that. Anon's prepared to protect Lucy, even from things he might need to experience. So, ending 3 continues on with Anon again leaving to join the military. There's a painfully drawn-out sequence right before he leaves to reinforce that Lucy is mentally unprepared that Anon is leaving for 3 years. Her entire life since graduation and over the summer has been reduced to just spending time with her boyfriend, which she enjoys, but now he's about to leave. Summarized, it's just a 20-minute scene that reiterates the same point over and over. Lucy is just going to fall apart when Anon leaves, and we all know it, and we all see it coming. They exchange promises. Anon asks Lucy to just become a better person, to try and achieve something, to make something. But Lucy just asks Anon to come back. We jump forward 3 years with Anon returning to Volcadera Bluffs, and expectantly he meets Lucy again. She's exhilarated that he's back, leaping into his arms, but just a few sentences into a conversation, you immediately know something's wrong. Lucy's changed. She's replaced her punk rocker look, her edgy look, with just a simple dress and a bow, and now she's working as an attendant for preschoolers, of all things. But quickly, Anon just learns that's all that's happened to her. Lucy's life has just been stopped for 3 years. She's made no attempt or failed to reconnect with anyone, and she's just locked away her music. The one thing that really defined her when she was Fang, locked away because that was Fang, and Fang has to be gone now. And Lucy's painfully aware that she's failed Anon's promise. And a lot of her dialogue here is self-critical, apologizing, self-deprecating, and Anon just comforts her almost as if she's a child. And really, Anon's the only adult here. He comes in and says, "We'll get you back into music. I'll get you back into music. You know, you'll get back to your friends. You'll rekindle with them. I'll make you do that." And Lucy protests, but Anon knows that's what she needs. She needs to grow up. She stopped for 3 years because she couldn't do anything by herself, and that's because she didn't grow during the events of the game. Not enough, at least. And for Anon, I suggest that he's not even complete either. Is he just going to make decisions for her? Is that what he wants to do? Is he going to relent to see when she's in pain? Is he strong enough to support her there? Is he going to overreact like he did before to someone who hurts Lucy? And this ending, it's almost a back to square one deal, you know. I'd argue that she's in a better position now. She has a really devoted, big buff military Anon to support her, but I could still see Lucy just never quite getting it. It's hard to change years of behavior like that. Every day having those habits it's mentally another slip down the slope, a reinforcement of that's who you are. You're a weak person. And that explains the unease I feel with this mending. You don't understand which way it's going to go. This is a very specific ending, tonally. A good ending with such heavy overtones of something still being wrong. From my intensive research of the README file, and also being directly told this, I learned that the original story draft only had 3 endings. The script was then submitted to the literature board on 4chan for some feedback, where it received a particular response, heavily criticizing this good ending, which I assume maps to ending 3 here. To summarize it, the complaint was that Anon coming in and just saving Fang from her prisons of labels and bad ideology was really no different than her still being stuck there. Everything just gets replaced. Non-binary punk for trophy tradwife. Trish to Anon. Fang just changes into Lucy, but is that who she wanted to be? Now, I can't exactly say what the game was back then, but from the context here, I assume that the original story was just this pandering wish fulfillment thingy. Big, strong, self-insert Anon saves the QT ptero waifu from the evil bad fills or whatever. I mean, a lot of guys would play that fantasy and then be rewarded with nudes at the end, and that's what I expected of this game, but that response, resonated with the writers enough to just change the entire game, to the extent of this random poster being directly credited as changing the trajectory of this entire game. And I assume that Ending 3 was probably rewritten a few times to invoke the feeling of you failing, playing up Lucy as being helpless and incomplete and incompetent without Anon to help her. And I mean, there's still a touching element to it, and it still ends in a marriage scene. But as I said, there's that unease. It cuts right before you can tell really which way it's going to go. Now, finally, we have Ending 4, which I assume was entirely created as a direct result to that criticism. To write a version of Fang that has actually self-actualized. Fang has truly found herself in this ending without needing to reject huge swaths of her personality or double down on specific parts or become dependent on Anon. It's the simple as approach, as I call it. Fang loves her music, so she plays music. Fang doesn't feel non-binary, so she returns to being gendered. Fang wants to forgive Trish and her other friends, so she does. She has the confidence to look at herself and say, yeah, I'm fine with this, I can do that. To look at the world and decide on her own actions. She doesn't radically change in the beginning of this ending. She still has that same sarcastic banter of Anon. She's still the same person in a way. It's just that her problems are now managed instead of being out of control. So now she can move forward in a healthy way. She understands what she is, where she wants to go, developing, seeing a path to take, and even when it gets confusing, she manages it. And if it does get too tough, she knows she has Anon and her other friends and herself to fall back on. A month before prom or so, Fang is asked by the principal himself to play, to cover up a scheduling error. She's nervous, obviously, and the idea of playing alone makes her sad about the band still being broken up. But she's willing to do it. She makes an effort to practice, to write that song that she's been working on all year, and Anon's playing the supporting role, helping her along the way, making sure she doesn't overwork, taking her out on a aquarium date to help her relax when she needed it, just supporting her decision. And the effort pays off. Her performance is a huge success. The entire class is cheering at the end as opposed to being jeered at from the beginning of the game. Very freeze frame, cut the credits, corny, but it's earned. We have another time skip here, this one for 5 years. Anon's going to college now. So there's that same separation plot point as in Ending 3. But with this stronger Fang, it plays out in a completely different way. Before the skip, Anon and Fang are still very much lovey-dovey, so the pain of being separated is still very real to them. But instead of feeling that constant dread of Anon leaving for so long, Fang shows resolve. She makes a decision to put a break on the relationship, as she can see that a long-distance relationship, it'll be difficult, probably won't work, and will just hold them back from possible opportunities to just difficulty of trying to maintain a romance without being able to see each other for months at a time. In her own words. Yeah, I'm just going to read the script here. This entire year has been one of the best in my life, and I want more of them like this. But with you gone, I got to make them good on my own, This right here is a complete 180 from Ending 3. It's seeing that oncoming storm and resolving to ride it out instead of just giving up and being blown away. To be alone, to develop new experiences. And after this skip, we see a Fang, a Lucy who has done it. She's an assistant music teacher at Volcano High. She's patched things up with her friends. She's abandoned Fang in a sense, but it's no longer a source of pain for her. That's how I used to be. It's, it's cringy, but it's lovable cringe. It's looking back on how you were in like elementary school, high school, and just being like, why was I like that? And just having a laugh at it. Most notably, she's not about to burst into tears of relief now that her beloved Anon is back in her life. He is still very important to her, but he isn't on a pedestal. He isn't divine. She's ready to start back up their relationship because she knows that even with the complexity of her life and how it is now, she truly loves Anon. big happy ending. So, that's my analysis of the character arcs and ending of Snootgame. It's a lot of words, isn't it? And for what purpose? What reasoning? Well, I think Snootgame is a really well-written story, considering the origins. I just don't expect much out of a fan game. So I find the writing here really impressive. I enjoy underestimating something. To see a piece of media just hit way above its weight class. To be surprised by the quality of something. It's sort of inspiring. If you take away the humor, which I knew I would really like, as I'm something of an edgy loser myself, just seeing really good examples about character growth was satisfying. And in the two areas I think are insanely important, empathy and confidence. Then Snootgame goes a step further to display those characters in alternate scenarios that play out differently depending on how much those characters have grown, so you can really compare and contrast the two. First ending aside, I think they're all fairly satisfying outcomes in a narrative sense. Satisfying outcomes for Fang and Anon, given their varying levels of character development. Ending 2 perfectly displays why the Doomer mindset's bad. Anon can't even muster up the balls to help his high school sweetheart when she's right in front of him suffering. Being a loner doesn't help anybody, and being fake doesn't help yourself. Ending 3 criticizes, the stereotypical visual novel ending that Snootgame almost fell into. Anon just can't swoop in and save the day and get a hot wife. Fang doesn't really grow there. Making all of Fang's decisions for her just makes her helpless. And ending 4 is the ultimate goal, self-actualization. You helped Fang by helping yourself, leading by example. And I think to test this, if Anon just permanently disappeared, I guess if he died, an ending 4 Fang would be able to take it and survive and move on. And I think there's a good message in all of these. I'm just thoroughly surprised by the earnest nature of Snootgame. It's way more sincere than I would have ever given it credit for, and that's what really fascinates me, seeing how what started as a mocking parody transformed into a very well-meaning story that in a way criticizes itself and its own origins, its own user base. And it really stands on its own, which makes its origins now sort of regrettable. And I would have really preferred an original cast of characters instead of just using co-ops. But, that's the situation we're in currently. The games are now linked, and one can't be judged without the other, and there's always going to be that negative aspect to it. Fortunately, the dev team, Cavemanon, I'm pretty sure they have some original stuff in the works, some original games, so I'm looking forward to what they can produce, and I hope other people will as well. I'll see if I can find some links I can throw in the description to shout those guys out. Anyway, I just can't believe you sat through all that. You better have been doing something productive at least. Anyway, here's the drawing. I hope you like it. I like it. I think I stopped right before, or right after I should have. It was around where I needed to stop. And here's a bunch of other Snoot arts I've drawn. Oh boy, look at me go. I think I might have a problem drawing all these little dinosaur people. Oh, you can find all this and more on my Newgrounds on Twitter, or maybe my Patreon if you dare to go there. Thanks for watching, and feel free to let me know what you think of my analysis or your general thoughts on Snootgame if you choose to play it or already have played it. You can leave those in a comment or a semi-threatening email. I'll be seeing y'all again soon, hopefully sooner than 6 months. Bye.